The time is at hand.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
But I am telling you right now,
we need a great reset.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen.
Merry Christmas. Hey, does that offend you? Merry Christmas then. Welcome to In Dark Places. My name is Junebug Fugit. I'm Santa's little helper. This week on the show, we have our annual Christmas tradition, the UFOs of Christmas Past, Chapter 3. Did all your Christmas wishes come true? I remember as a kid, I loved Pac-Man, the arcade game. Anytime I would go anywhere and they had a Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man or Super Pac-Man or any variety of Pac-Man in their store, then I had to play it. I love Pac-Man, and I always have. And there's this guy, Doug, who had a restaurant here where I live. I guess you would call it a restaurant. They sold food and groceries and stuff. It's kind of a restaurant. Had good hot dogs. And he had a Pac-Man arcade in his restaurant. And anytime my mom would order any food from there or anything, I would play Pac-Man while the food was getting ready. So the restaurant shut down, I guess, good 20 years ago now. 15 anyway. Yeah, somewhere around there. And when the restaurant shut down, I saw Doug at the store where I work. And I hollered at him, "Hey Doug, would you possibly want to sell your Pac-Man arcade?" And Doug was always a nice, jolly, friendly guy to me in the past. And just more or less making conversation with him, I guess, because I didn't really have any money to give him for a Pac-Man arcade anyway. I was just wondering if I could possibly get it, because I love Pac-Man. And Doug got very upset about this question. He looked me dead in the eyes. He said, "Under no circumstances." And he just walked away. So, 3 or 4 years ago, this company, Arcade 1UP, came out and they started making old retro arcade cabinets. So I bought a Pac-Man arcade, and I have it sitting right across from me in my little makeshift studio. I just had to point out that I had one good Christmas wish come true, and that Doug didn't stop me. So take that, Doug. I've got a Pac-Man arcade.
This is Mr. Haunted for In Dark Places with breaking news. An elderly Washington, D.C. man was arrested Thursday and charged with killing his wife after an argument over pancakes. Federal prosecutors said Stephen Schwartz, 85, is accused of fatally stabbing his wife Sharon Schwartz, 81, at their home Sunday. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia said Stephen Schwartz did not want to eat the pancakes she made and stabbed her in the back. Police responded to a report of a stabbing at 3:40 p.m. Well, what are you doing giving the guy pancakes at 3:40 p.m. in the afternoon? It's obviously a morning treat. And found Sharon Schwartz with injuries and Stephen Schwartz with self-inflicted injuries, according to the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington. Both were taken to a hospital where Sharon Schwartz died. According to a police affidavit filed in the district criminal case, Stephen Schwartz said that he has an aversion to food. His wife was trying to make him eat, and there was an argument. He said in the presence of police that he has a condition of eating diversion and depression. I wish I had that. maybe I'd be a little skinnier. He also said that his wife did not deserve to die and that he wished he had died. In a later interview, he told investigators that he and his wife were married for 40 years, that he loved her, and he had prayed the killing was a delusion, according to another police document filed with the court. He said he had been recovering from a stroke at the time. Stephen Schwartz is charged with second-degree murder while armed. A Superior Court judge ordered Schwartz be held without bail Thursday. A preliminary hearing is scheduled for January 2nd. An attorney listed as representing Schwartz did not immediately respond to In Dark Places' request for a comment late Thursday. And there you have it. Breaking news. What do you think of them apples, Junebug?
Those apples were delicious. Thank you, sir. I used to get an apple and an orange and a bag of walnuts in my stocking every year, and I never was big on fruit or walnuts. And that story was sent in by our news correspondent, Heidi Haunted. Thanks, Heidi. UK missile base tracks UFO after defense company warns little green men are inside. By Henry Dalton Stone. Thanks, Henry Dalton. A UFO was spotted by a key UK ballistic missile early warning base in Yorkshire, which set off a top-secret probe. Fresh documents have revealed RAF flying dills on the North Yorkshire moors near Whitby ordered an investigation after an unknown target was identified. The base was used extensively during the Cold War to track any missiles that might be fired from the Soviet Union, and was famous for its 3 golf ball-shaped rodomes that helped it do that. Workers would be given an ominous 4-minute warning of an incoming attack, and UFOs were often spotted on the radar screens. However, there was one incident during the 1981-1982 season that prompted a secret inquiry to be set up. While unknown UFOs were a common sight and the RAF regularly tracked them using radars, this one couldn't match with anything on the official computing technology available. When the unknown did not reappear, RAF Group Captain David Todd tasked the defense contractor to have a proper look into what the unknown object might be. Theories from the defense powerhouse included that it had little green men inside. Todd admitted, "Well, you gotta be open-minded about this stuff. You can't discount that possibility," Todd said. In the end, though, the conclusion was not quite as exciting. They decided it must have been just a meteorite which was rotating in the same direction as the Earth. Nevertheless, a letter sent by Ministry of Defense UFO Desk Officer Peter Watkins in 1982 explained that flying dills could pick up an alien spacecraft, but only if it was within the borders of what their radars could reach. As a result, experts have concluded that an alien invasion could be just as quiet and subtle as that which occurred in the iconic novel War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And thanks Paul Chadwick for sending that story in. And now here is the Nicolas Cage Meltdown of the Week.
I wanted Cinnabar. Cinnabar! To my liking! This is my vision!
And that was Nicolas Cage's 100th appearance here on In Dark Places. We reached out to Nick and asked him if he had any comment on being on the show for 100 episodes. And here is his response.
I went online stupidly and I Googled my name. Suddenly, I was a meme on t-shirts. You don't say. And what had happened in that video is he was cherry picking different meltdowns that I had with no sense of Act 1 or Act 2 or how the character got there. There was nothing I could do to stop it, nothing I could do to control it.
Yeah, that's not entirely true. We didn't reach out to him. He sounds a little under the weather. What's going on, Nick? And it's kind of ironic that we had a news story from 1981 and 1982 because UFOs of Christmas Past, Chapter 3, is all about the 1980s. The Rendlesham Forest incident was a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights near Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England in late December 1980, which became linked with claims of UFO landings. The events occurred just outside RAF Woodbridge, which was used at the time by the United States Air Force. Air Force personnel, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, claimed to see things they described as a UFO sighting. The occurrence is the most famous of claimed UFO events to have happened in the United Kingdom, and is among the best-known reported UFO events worldwide. It has been compared to the Roswell UFO incident in the United States, and is sometimes referred to as Britain's Roswell. The UK Ministry of Defence has stated the event posed no threat to national security, and therefore it was never investigated as a security matter. Skeptics have explained the sightings as a misinterpretation of a series of nocturnal lights, a fireball, the Orpheus Lighthouse, and bright stars. They try to say these military guys don't know the difference between a lighthouse and stars and a UFO. So, I don't know. I'm not buying it. I think they know. On December 26th, around 3 a.m., a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge saw lights apparently descending into nearby Rendlesham Forest. These lights have been attributed by astronomers to a piece of nocturnal debris seen burning up as a fireball, or meteor, over southern England at the time. Servicemen initially thought it was a downed aircraft, but upon entering the forest to investigate, they saw, according to Hall's memo, what they described as a glowing object, metallic in appearance, with colored lights. As they attempted to approach the object, it appeared to move through the trees, and the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. One of the servicemen, Sergeant Jim Pennison, later claimed to have encountered a craft of unknown origin while in the forest, although there was no publicized mention of this at the time, and there is no corroboration from other witnesses. Shortly after 4 a.m., local police were called to the scene, but reported that the only lights they could see were those from the Orpheus Lighthouse, some miles away on the coast. After daybreak on the morning of December 26, servicemen returned to a small clearing near the eastern edge of the forest, and they found 3 small impressions on the ground in a triangular pattern, as well as burn marks and broken branches on nearby trees. At 10:30, the local police were called out again, this time to see the impressions, which they thought could have been made by an animal. Georgina Bruni, in her book You Can't Tell the People, published a photograph of the supposed landing site taken on the morning after the first sighting. And this is a December 27th report that was sent in to the National UFO Reporting Center. December 27th report. Believe this to be linked to U.S. Air Base Bentwaters, known as the Rendlesham Forest incident in 1980. ball of fire went into sea close to former airbase, Bentwaters, Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, England. UK clear. Winters. Night massive. Appeared to be controlled, rather coming straight down and coming down at an angle. The only place this could have crashed or landed without massive destruction to surrounding area is in the sea. I believe this to be just off Woodbridge, close to Oxford Lighthouse, also close to two Air Force bases, RAF Woodbridge and US Bentwaters. And then there was a second report sent in on December 27th. Hopefully it's easier to read. Additional information of the Bentwaters incident. I was on site in RAF Woodbridge, UK for a year period from June 19XX to October 19XX. It's censored. This report relates to the Bentwaters incident. I need to provide some background for you. About 5 years ago, and I don't know 5 years ago from when, I was watching the History Channel and I saw a man being interviewed, and I recognized him as an airman I knew back in the 70s. This was the first I had heard of the UFO sighting just east of the base in the late fall of 1980. I have never told anyone this story before, and I believe that I can shed some additional light on the situation from the perspective of a weatherman and one who has certain knowledge and experience in observation. This should be interesting. Like these Air Force guys don't know what they're talking about. Let's take the weatherman's word for it. I don't know. To start, I do not know how familiar you are with this Bentwater incident. I'm pretty familiar. Kind of makes me mad. It should be called the Woodbridge incident, as it occurred just east of RAF Woodbridge, not Bentwaters. Bear with me here. The base is oriented generally east to west. In fact, the runway orientation is exactly 927. This makes it very easy to observe the weather and the direction from the center of the airport. For a several-month period, all during the summer and fall of 1980, I and the unidentified person under my command observed lights to the east of the base in Her Majesty's Rendlesham Forest. This is a rather large strand of trees between RAF Woodbridge and Bentwaters. Indeed, the east gate led to a small road which was a quick way to get to and from the base, from one base to another. My family member, deleted, was also in the deleted military at the time, and she was assigned to the Bentwaters base weather station. Normally we worked the same shift, and I would drop family member off to work, go to my work, and reverse the process at the end of my shift. Woodbridge was south of Bentwaters. We lived north of Bentwaters in a little town of Leiston along the North Sea. I digress. I know, just get on with it. What I am about to write is something that I have been thinking a lot about. I am not about publicity, and I will not leave my name. On my way from work to pick up my family member, I went to the east gate, turned left, and headed on up to Bentwaters. I had gone 200 yards and was pretty deep in the woods. It was foggy. The visibility was less than a mile. This was pretty common in the fall. There is a climatological maxima for fog along the North Sea at that time of year. I was driving my little deleted foreign car, doing about 40. There was no radio in the car, just tooling along. Up and off to my right in the woods, about 50 feet into the woods, I saw a bright pulsating light. The frequency of pulses was quick and was an orangish, reddish color. This freaked me out pretty good, and I didn't know what it was. The hair on the back of my neck went straight out unexpectedly, so I became very frightened and gunned the car and left. Thinking back, I did not see a craft, but I remain convinced to this day that this is something I can't explain. I talked to my wife about this and gradually forgot about it till this entire incident came back into my attention several years ago. About a year ago, the Halt tapes became more public, and this kind of freaked me out too. I knew Lieutenant Colonel Halt and spoke with him many times in my capacity of providing deleted information and the various on-base agencies. I have read several reports of this incident. Many contain inaccuracies, misjudgments, and many are just plain wrong. People I worked with and I speculated for months as to the source of the lights to the east of the airfield. We considered and rejected the idea that it was the lights from the Orphaness Lighthouse. We knew that one, bearing 140 degrees and at 7 miles. Little light, pause, big light, pause, little light, pause, rinse, repeat. The light we saw was immediately off the base proper, within a half mile of where my unit was assigned. As is the practice of my many deleted units, we were assigned on the deleted floor of the deleted base. Our job was to maintain a continuous deleted watch. I'm about to just delete this report. We had no other duties other than to monitor the deleted, and as such, we were outside a lot, hours per day and night, just looking around and monitoring our deleted instruments. Something that isn't talked about much. When the colonel and his staff measured radiation, they knew what they were doing. The base still had an active WSA, Weapon Storage Area, for nuclear weapons on the base. We even had an armored personnel carrier, painted Air Force blue on the base. Pretty cool, actually. This is why a lieutenant colonel and other security forces were in the woods outside a small tactical fighter base after midnight in December. The Air Force doesn't fool around with their nukes, ever. If anything, I have understated what I saw, but at this point I'm not prepared to say much more. I have a good job. I am now retired from the Air Force, and I think it's pretty safe here to put down a little of what I saw. So I don't know, I'm just confused. Was it the lighthouse, or was it the mysterious light that can't be explained? I don't get this guy. But here's a December 28th report that was filed with the National UFO Reporting Center. The Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Halt, visited the site with several servicemen in the early hours of December 28, 1980. It was reported as the 29th by Halt, but it's actually the 28th. It took radiation readings in the triangle of depressions and in the surrounding area using an NPDR-27, a standard U.S. military radiation survey meter. Although they recorded 0.07 millirachins per hour, I don't know what that is. In other regions, they detected 0.03 to 0.04 millirachins per hour around the background level. Furthermore, they detected a similar burst over half a mile away from the landing site. Halt recorded the events on a microcassette recorder. It was during this investigation that a flashing light was seen across the field to the east, almost in line with the farmhouse. As the witnesses had seen on the first night, the Orphaness Lighthouse is visible further to the east in the same line of sight. Later, according to Halt's memo, 3 star-like lights were seen in the sky, 2 to the north, 1 to the south, about 10 degrees above the horizon. Halt said that the brightest of these hovered for 2 or 3 hours and seemed to beam down a stream of light from time to time. Astronomers have explained these star-like lights as bright stars.
I'm sitting here Christmas morning recording this. Santa Claus just came, and I'm going to share this story that comes from right up the road from me in Ridgefield, Connecticut. But first, enjoy this little clip from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So, anyways, this story comes out of Ridgefield, Connecticut, Christmas Day, 1985. Witnesses were a male, 18 years old, and a female, 14 years old. I was sitting on a window bench seat with my back to the window and felt a strange sensation, like a light was shining in on me. I turned around and witnessed the UFO. The person I was speaking to saw my face and knew something was strange. I said, "Look outside. What is that?" She was in shock also. We both became pretty excited. We just could not explain the object. We both got up and ran down the stairs and opened the front doors and out into the yard. That's when it became kind of scary. This thing didn't go away, and it was really there. It was massive, hovering about 100 to 200 feet above our yard. It was a circular object on its side, just sitting in the sky. There was a pulsating glow around the edge of the object. I don't know if it was lights or just energy, but it was amazing to me because for such a huge object, there was almost no sound. The only sound was a humming pattern, but not anything I have heard before, like it was in your body. The time becomes hard to explain when your adrenaline kicks in, but when we both looked at each other and knew it wasn't going away, we yelled for our family to come and witness this also. When our family got to the front door, this massive object created a cloud and slowly rolled behind it, never to be seen again.
The story is from Bedford County in the Stewartsville area of Virginia, December 24th, 1981. My mother and I were traveling back home from a day of Christmas shopping in Roanoke via Route 24. We were talking about the birth of Jesus and the Star of David, and had just passed the Blue Ridge Parkway bridge that goes over top of Route 24. We were talking about the Star of David when I looked up into the sky and said, "Did the Star of David look like that, Mommy?" Directly ahead of us in the sky was what appeared to be the brightest star I had ever seen. It seemed to take my mother by surprise as well, because of her reaction. By this time, we had gone up the first hill on the way to Stewartsville, and were passing Wonder Drug on our right-hand side of the road. By this time, we were discussing how bright the object in the sky was, and how it appeared to be getting lower in the sky. We went up the second hill on the way to Stewartsville, and took a left at the Hopkins store. It's now a Getty Mart, I think. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed from the time we first noticed the star. We passed Stewartsville Elementary on the right side, kept our attention on the star. By this time, my mother was getting a little excited, I think, because I remember her saying something about how it was following us. As far as I could tell, it was going along the same path as we were. We lived in the Shady Grove area, and the road goes down a steep hill and through a couple of S-turns. My mother was starting to panic because the star is right behind us. We drove through the curves and came to a small pond and a workshop on the right-hand side of the road. The pond is dried up today, but the workshop is still there. We should go there sometime. We pulled off the road in front of the pond, which is on the right side of the car, rolled down the windows. By this time, about 35 minutes had passed. The bright star was about 100 yards from the far side of the pond. Then the bright lights just turned off. There was a disc, 2 plates face to face, shaped object about 15 to 20 feet off the water of the pond. The moon was full that night, and the reflection of the disc could be seen. Slowly, the disc came across the pond. The water didn't move. There were no ripples of any kind. The only sound that craft made was the sound of what sounds like an amplifier when it's turned up to full blast, but there's no music playing. My mother and I just sat there, not making a sound, watching this disc-shaped craft. The craft made its way right over the car. We could not have been much more than 15 feet from it. I can say how far we were from it because it was inches away from the power lines, and the power lines are maybe 25 feet from the ground. I don't know how long we sat there, but we didn't get home until about 10 o'clock that night. My father was kind of mad that we got home so late. My mother can't remember just how long we were there either, but I'm sure it was at least an hour and a half. There are a few things I can remember from my childhood, but this I can remember like it was yesterday. The smell of the air, the sound the craft made, have been implanted into my mind. I would love to know how the technology allowed this ship to fly. This sighting happened in Webster, Massachusetts, December 25th, 1981. Our unexplained experience happened in 1981, Christmas Eve, December 24th, between 12:30 a.m. and 1 a.m. My ex-husband, myself, and my children were driving home from a family Christmas party. It was very late, and it was very dark because the road we were on was Lakeside Avenue, Webster, Massachusetts, and they didn't have many light poles. As we came up to the lakeside beach, I saw to my left, just above the trees, some type of thing that looked like a huge sled. It was only about 20 to 25 feet up. It had 2 running blades that had 2 different colors blinking. I remember blues and reds. It was so quiet, and the air was so crisp and clear that night. All I remember hearing is the crunching of the snow under the tires. I don't know why, but I don't remember being scared. The object was probably there for a couple minutes. I'm not sure because we hurried home. We went to bed and never spoke about it. I didn't speak about it because at the time I didn't remember it. I just found out recently that my ex-husband recalled everything that night. When I started recalling what happened was around 1999. My husband now, myself, and kids went up to North Conway, New Hampshire, I believe around 2006, for an annual vacation that year. We were all talking about scary things, and I decided to tell them what I had experienced. Now remember, I hadn't talked about it, because I only just remembered it a few years back. As I told them about the sled, one of my sons stopped me from continuing and said, "Yes, you told Dad to get back in the car." I looked at him and I said, "You saw it?" And he said, "Oh yes." My son only remembers a very bright white light. He said that his dad said, "Oh, we better hurry and get home because it looks like Santa's coming." I don't recall any of that conversation. I asked my son how long he remembered it, and he said he thinks he's always remembered it, but he too never talked about it until I brought it up. None of my other kids remember anything from that night. So to make matters weirder, my ex-husband did not see a sled type of craft on the left side of the road. His recollection is that it was directly in front of us, just behind some house where there was a marsh area. He explained it was enormous, oval-shaped, with many colored lights and a large white light coming from it. He said he always remembered seeing it, but doesn't know why we didn't talk more about it. He does not recall any conversations, but he said all of the children were awake. I still ask myself why I didn't remember something so incredible. Over the years, my son has seen a couple of unexplained objects in the sky. I have never seen anything again, although I have had 2 unexplained instances. The first was I woke up one morning and had a long scratch on my thigh, which has left a scar. And then the other time I woke up with a bad burn on my arm, which also left a scar. I felt no pain until I woke up. I don't understand why I need to tell this story, but I do. It's been bothering me for so many years. Good story. We're glad you told it.
Wouldn't it be great if you could get everybody's Christmas gift at the same place? Maybe you can. I'll let you in on a little secret. The Holiday Gift Center at Blockbuster. After all, everybody has a favorite movie. And who has more favorites than Blockbuster? Besides having more movies to rent, they also have more movies to give. Oh, plus they have all kinds of video games for the kids. So take care of everybody on your list. Make it a Blockbuster holiday.
Kansas City, Missouri, December 25th, 1982. On December 25th at about 1:25 in the morning, after coming out of midnight mass, my mother and I were driving back home. At first we thought we saw the moon. It was like an amber glow. But as we were driving, we noticed that this so-called moon was following us, since we were alone on the street. We also noticed that this amber object was coming closer and closer to us. My mother had the nerve to say, "Go out there and see what it was." And I said, "No." I told my mother, "Let's go home." She wanted to go down the street to the police station and report it. So, as we got near the station, another man came by, and he questioned what was in the sky. So by that time, there were about 6 of us looking and pointing up in the air. But someone must have called the police, because there was a helicopter in the sky circling it. And the helicopter stopped circling and stopped in midair like helicopters do. And a surreal thing happened. It went away. Didn't even break the silence. So I told my mother if she mentioned this, I would deny it. And of course, she mentioned it, and I denied it. But after all these years, it still bothers me. Now my mother has passed on, and I'm trying to tell my sister and my sons, and no one believes me. We believe you. High Point, North Carolina, December 25th, 1982. I was just outside of High Point, North Carolina during Christmas Day evening of 1982 at my grandparents' farm. My parents and I arrived a day earlier than normal for the holidays due to a death in the family just before Christmas. The funeral visitation was that evening, but I elected to stay at the farm for various reasons. It was an unusually warm night for this time of year in that area. I decided to take a walk across a hill adjacent and above my grandparents' house and walk my uncle's dog. I took notice that there were a lot of jetliners on approach to KGSO Airport, passing over the farm from south to north, before banking right base to runway 5 at GSO. After being an avid aircraft/aviation enthusiast, I pretty much was able to identify that there were 737-100/200, 727-100/200, and DC-9 jetliners passing over by the landing configuration of each type, as well as there being enough residual light to actually see the bottom of each craft clearly. The sequence of separation of the aircraft ranged approximately 3 to 5 minutes at the height of an arrival push of scheduled flights. I paid only limited attention to the flights, except when they were directly overhead. At one point I was facing south, seeing the airliners coming at me head on. It was at this point that I saw something extremely unusual occur. I saw 2 jetliners approaching out of the south, and one passed over with another behind it. The next one appeared to be a DC-9 with its landing lights set far apart near its wingtips. I took one glance and then lowered my head to pay attention to my uncle's dog. I then looked back up to see why the jet had not passed over. It appeared closer due to the wider separation of the landing lights, and then realized something was off, as the jetliner had not passed yet, and it appeared to be moving either very slowly or it was larger than I first thought. Larger than a DC-9? GSO normally didn't service DC-10s or larger aircraft. I kept my eye on this jet, puzzled why it was so slow to approach, when suddenly the right landing light to my left, from my perspective, appeared to drop as if the aircraft was banking very steeply to the right, going into a full roll to inverted flight. My first thought was that this jet was in serious trouble, and I was about to witness a crash. But the right landing light accelerated completely around it until it was below the left light, and then suddenly accelerated at about a 45-degree angle and sped away until it disappeared, quickly faded away. It was then I realized that the left landing light was stationary, not rolling or connected to the right light, and that the right side light had actually circled the left light before accelerating up and away, westward. I also then realized that the other light was still moving toward me. I ran quickly toward my uncle and aunt's house, about 120 yards away. As I reached the house, the other light reached me, and that light turned out to be the nose strut light of a 727. The aircraft appeared as if there was nothing wrong with it, and it continued toward GSO, making no sudden changes in turn rate, direction, or altitude. I did not see any other similar objects in the area that evening or subsequent evenings after that. Characteristics of the object were that it was the same intensity and color as the lights of the 3 jetliners and made no sound. From my perspective, it appeared to be flying in formation to the right of the jet and appeared to have the same forward speed as the jet prior to the barrel roll, and 45-degree climb to the west before disappearing. This report is from Toka, Georgia, December 24th, 1984. On the mentioned night of December 24th, I was to leave to take on a new job, moving from Toka, Georgia to Montgomery, Alabama to work as a computer technician at the local Greyhound track. We had to be there no later than Christmas Day, and I turned off all utilities, giving notice to our apartment, and off we went. Feeling tired, my wife and I pulled along a dirt road into the woods in Toka to catch a power nap. As we settled back in our seats, looking south at the beauty of the stars, I saw 3 lights in the form of a triangle, just kind of sitting in the sky at a great distance. Then I thought I saw them move about 3 inches as viewed in a linear measurement from my view. Then, after about 30 seconds, the lights did not slowly, but at a great rate of speed, moved from one side of my windshield's view completely to the other side of the windshield in about 2 seconds. I sat amazed and didn't say anything, trying to rationalize what I had just seen. My wife also, without my knowing, had seen the same thing. After a few seconds, she replied, somewhat amazed and unsure, "Did you see that?" And I replied, "What?" to check to see if she meant the same thing that I had seen. She said, "Those 3 lights." I knew that she had seen it then. To confirm I knew what she meant, I said, in the shape of a triangle. And she was just as amazed as I was and said, "Yeah." We have both since had several supernatural events of various types happen in our lives.
UFOs of Christmas Past. This one's out of Orrington, Maine, Christmas Eve, 1989, at approximately 11:45 p.m. Playing cards late one night, I kept noticing a bright light over the island several hundred feet in front of our lake house. This was not unusual because planes often came across the lake as one of the flight paths to the Bangor airport. What was unusual was the light stayed the same without changing and there was no noise. Both my husband and I kept saying, "That's weird. That's weird. That's weird." But we're convinced it was a plane. After some time, we knew this was not right and went outside to see what it was. And to our amazement, we could distinguish in the night sky a large triangular-shaped object hovering slightly above the trees on this 3-acre island. Had the object been more directly over the island, it would not have been much smaller in diameter. The air seemed muffled, but there was no sound. Two large round lights, which looked like the burners of a gas stove, bluish, were on two ends, and under the object, in a circular form, were smaller lights, greenish. It must have been at least 200 feet long. My kids would swim to the island, but it was about a quarter mile in front of our house. There was no noise. My husband started to walk closer to the shoreline to get closer, but I was scared. When he did that, it seemed to start to move slowly towards us, and I ran to the house. When I stopped and looked back, it sat still for a moment or two, and then just bolted off. No noise. We called the airport the next day to see if the stealth had been in, but we got nowhere for information. I have written online somewhere, but never heard anything. No, we were not drinking. We do not have psychological issues or obsessed about this issue. Just very weird. And after this event, I would wake up screaming on many occasions, which I had never done before, yet I had no idea why. And nearly 6 months after the event, both my husband and I were slammed out of bed in the middle of the night by nothing we could see. We sat up most of that night trying to figure out what was wrong with us or the house. Maybe it had something to do with the object. We sold the house, and the doctor that purchased it had told me he's been happy and not mentioned anything unusual. And of course, I was not about to say anything. Maybe it was really the stealth, or maybe I just had some night screams for normal reasons. I don't know what, but perhaps it happens. But there truly is no explanation for the violent forced blow sending both my husband and I out of the bed and onto the floor. That's it, the end.
This report comes out of Ocala, Florida. At approximately 10 p.m., saw a very large triangular-shaped object traveling from southwest to northeast. The object appeared transparent, but had points of red lights on corners of the object. Maybe 8 to 10 lights. Not sure if they were blinking. The object was moving slowly, emitting no sound whatsoever. We commented about the fact that we could see through the object. Nothing solid, almost like a group of toothpicks put together with pinpoints of red lights on each connection. The object may have been less than 1,000 feet high. Hard to tell. But it was definitely not a formation of several objects higher in the sky. This was very low in the sky. I reported it to the sheriff's department, and they denied any other reports. In 2001, another man described having seen the same object that night and described it the same way to us. This sighting happened in Qazvin, Iran, December 24th, 1987, at about 4 a.m. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I strongly believe, and I saw a yellow flying plate close to Earth, and I could see it very clearly. I was a kid, and in those days we didn't have any information about space and UFOs. After I'd grown up, I found out it was a UFO. It was completely silent, like a bubble in the air, and quiet. It was very close, and about 1.5 meters, and there was a yellow band around the object. It was in the middle of the night, and under moonlight, I could see it. In those days, in my home country, we never had a chance to know about space and UFOs, and what happened, and I saw, was completely without previous knowledge, or reading books, or watching movies or cartoons. Kind of hard to read that one, but pretty good one. You know what? It's getting kind of cold in here. I'm going to get some hot chocolate or something. Here's Brandon with our next report.
This story comes from Santiago, Chile, December 25th, 1989, at 1 a.m. A light went straight up into the sky, hovered around for a while, changed color, and moved around. The light was bright red and eventually faded. I was sitting on the balcony of the apartment. I was looking up into the sky and observed. At first, what I thought might be a flare or a rocket, but the object was traveling upwards. The object changed from a bright white to a very red color. It traveled upward and then seemed to hover. There was no noise or any other phenomena associated with the event. I was certain that the object was some type of UFO.
1980s UFO sightings. Squeezing this one in from 1990. And it starts, this is from December 24th, 1990, in the Atlantic Ocean near Virginia. Listen, I'm not a UFO kind of person. I don't even believe in UFOs. But I feel that I owe the UFO community this report. About 20 years ago, while serving on board the USS carrier JFK USS CV-67, myself and 7 to 8 other shipmates were having some fun on the carrier's flight deck. We were on the way back to Norfolk, Virginia, and most of the aircrafts already departed the ship back to their home bases. It's a common practice for fighter jets to fly back home. Anyway, while on the flight deck on a very bright night, an oval, shiny UFO appeared out of nowhere. It was green, yellow, and bright. It did not look like anything I have ever seen in the skies. When it appeared, it looked like it was right on top of us, but very high in the night sky. It stood there for about 40 to 50 seconds as if it were watching us. Myself and the others were just speechless. None of us said a word. All we did was look up in amazement. Without a sound, then an amazing sight happened. As it came out of nowhere, it left the same. Only this time, we witnessed how it all happened. In a fraction of a second, there was what appeared to be a rapture in space. It looked like a doorway to a different place in space. And just like that, the bright green yellow object was sucked in that doorway and vanished. It happened very fast, but all of us could see that once the object was sucked in, the rapture closed behind the UFO. I swear this is true and I have no reason to make it up. I just thought I'd share this event with the rest of the world. I don't know why it took me 20 years to do this, but it did, believe it or not. I don't really care but I'm sure of my event, and this is not a bull story. It really happened. Thank you.
The story is from Exeter, Rhode Island. The following incident occurred in Exeter, Rhode Island on Route 102. It was Christmas Eve, 1987. I was 9 years old. I was carrying presents out to the car at about 8 p.m. I looked up into the dark sky and saw a rectangular-shaped UFO. It had lights that were white, red, and green. It appeared that in the white-lit windows there were shadowy heads. Things became more unusual when the objects stopped while moving in a straight line and suddenly turned on a dime in an L-shaped line. Too frozen in awe to move until that point. It seemed like I watched it for up to a minute. I ran into the house to get my mother. By the time she came out with me, a few seconds later, she and I caught the tail end of a flash as the object had quickly taken off. Even though we both clearly recall the incident 26 years later, she was only able to see the tail of the object and the flash. This confirmed to her that I had in fact seen something unusual. This report is from Interstate 10 in the desert of Texas, December 23rd, 1988. While in between two other 18-wheel trucks going 60 miles an hour, I lost 30 minutes, and the third truck did not see me. When he caught up to the first, there were no turnoffs. We had synchronized watches at the truck stop, deciding where to stop next. After the incident, my watch was 15 minutes slow. I had 1:16, and they had 1:31. They were both ahead of me on the side of the road, having pulled off to decide what to do. The very big African-American guy who drove for blank truck lines began screaming and crying, and he left in a hurry. But myself and the blank transportation driver talked about it for a while. We saw no craft. Remember, no aliens per se. I remembered a few years later that there were owls in the road. I apparently became a different person. I got divorced. I have new memories. How can they make a whole truck disappear? Where did I go? Why were our watches different? I checked the ones in the truck, and they were slow 15 minutes too. His truck clock was 15 minutes fast, as was the wily driver. 15 minutes were lost, that is sure. But how can the whole truck be gone? I'm doubting that they were owls. I don't understand. Something happened to me then. I can speak Spanish. I never took one class of Spanish in my life, so help me God. I don't know any Spanish-speaking people. I would like some answers, please. It has been 11 years, and still that day affects my life. I can't remember much about the owls. I can't understand how come I remember all those owls. I wanted to talk to them. I was thinking that they were beautiful owls. They were brown, big owls. I get irritated when I think about this, and I cannot stop that from happening. I have tried. I want to understand what happened. I know that I will not find out what happened to me, but I think someone might be able to help me. I was leaving Mexico with a load of Bocelli, and I had waited all day to get shaved ice blown into the trailer in Nogales, New Mexico. I went north to I-10 and began the easterly trek. I was stopped at the exit scale in Texas, as I had run out of hours and was forced to shut down for 8 hours. It was 3:20 or so p.m. I logged that I left the scale at 3:15 on December 22nd, 1988, and went east toward Wilmington, North Carolina. Stopped at a truck stop and took a shower and ate. In the diner, I met two other drivers that were headed east and wanting to get home for Christmas in South Carolina. We could help each other. We left the truck stop, and about an hour later, the blank drivers had to switch so that I was in the rear when they stopped. I passed them and became the middle truck, as the first one, Z, blank transportation truck kept going. I was about a half a mile behind the first truck, and by the time the one that stopped got going, we had slowed down to about 30 miles an hour, waiting. Zero went over a hill in front of me, and instantaneously I heard them both hollering for me on the radio. "Where are you? Where are you?" I said that I was right here, and then I found out that they were both ahead of me on the side of the road. I pulled over when I got to them. They said that it had been 30 minutes since I last talked, and it had been only a minute or so. I looked at my watch and said that it was 1:16, and they said that it was 1:31. We checked my truck, which was the same as my watch, and we checked both of their watches and the clocks in the trucks, and they were the same. And then the big guy started crying and ran off. The other driver and I were talking about it for a while, and we left, and then things started to happen to me, all bad. I got divorced. I went to jail for a week. I had to leave my friends. Just bad stuff. Until I had a vasectomy, and then I got my life back. No more problems. New house, new career, great family. Can anyone shed some light on this? I know I can't find out exactly what happened, but I'm hoping that someone will be able to help me fill in these numerous blanks.
UFOs of Christmas Past. This report is out of Bessemer, Michigan, December 23rd, 1990, 6:15 a.m. It was morning. The sun was not up yet, but was beginning to get light. I was going east on Highway US 2 between Ironwood and Bessemer, Michigan, going around a corner and then into a valley between two bluffs. I want to go between two bluffs. Well, anyway. Then, all of a sudden, an object about 50 degrees up, about half mile away, traveling north to south at a slow speed, passed over the bluff, then over the road in front of me. This object had an oblong shape with a flat bottom with 13 lights underneath. All looked like gym lights and pulsing bright, then dim at the same time. There were windows in front and back that was lit up from the inside. This object was metallic in color because I was on the west side of the object. I saw the bottom black and the edges metallic. That's when I know it was metallic. The object kept going south until out of sight. And that's our little friend from Bessemer, Michigan, who traveled between bluffs.
This report comes from Steamboat Springs, Colorado. We were driving to Steamboat Springs in the evening of Christmas Eve, and I'm not certain of what year it was, either 89 or 90. We were south of Steamboat, X number of miles, way up in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. The highway was deserted, no other cars in sight. It was a very clear night, and all the stars were visible. Suddenly, a big male deer, a buck with a huge rack, was slowly walking onto the road, directly in the path we were traveling. I was in the passenger seat. The driver in the car put on the brakes and started steering into the other lane so we wouldn't hit the deer. That scared me a lot, but we barely missed it. Just a few seconds, maybe 5 seconds later, the entire area all around was lit up with blue-colored flashes of lights. Flashes were very bright, lighting up everything. I remember the shadows that were casting from trees and rocks and stuff as very noticeable. There was not a pattern in the timing of the flashes of lights. The flashes were quick ones, a 1 second delay, then another flash, then another delay, something like 2 more flashes, then another delay, then an abundance of intense flashes, and so on. It seemed to be coming from above the car and to the left, and high enough to light up everything in the area as well. And way out in front of us, thousands of yards in all directions, from left to right, from where I sat, I was yelling at my roommate, the driver, to stop because I knew there was something awesome outside and really wanted to see it. My roommate was scared and sped up, running away from whatever it was. We argued for a few minutes and then started trying to figure out what it could have been. The story comes from Wayzata, Minnesota, December 24th, 1990. December 24th, 1990, my grandpa was driving me home from a Christmas party, and about 3/4 of a mile away from his house, we saw lights in the sky. He pulled off Highway 12 and we watched the lights just sit there for about 15 minutes. Put the window down and we listened, and we couldn't hear anything. And he put the window up because it was so cold. We watched and watched. It just sat there and silent, and it didn't move. I think that there were 14 lights. My grandpa told me that it was probably Santa Claus, and I believed him until I started to hear about UFOs. I could only see lights. There was a thin cloud cover, and it was dark outside, so I could not see the object. The lights were so bright, they were about the size of my hand. They were not in any pattern. They were just scattered about the sky. They were not stars, I can tell you that. They were far too large and bright. After about 15 minutes, my grandpa pulled back onto the road and we left.
UFOs of Christmas Past. Out of Fairfax, California. Christmas Eve, 1990. 10 p.m. At first, I thought the white orb was a helicopter with a spotlight, then realized first that it was silent. Then there was no beam from the light. By this time, we were all looking at it. Then, after 20 to 30 seconds, 2 orbs, one out of the top and one out of the bottom. The orb out of the top and the bottom circled clockwise. So now there is one smaller orb, large orb, small orb, and a row up and down. At this point, we are all amazed at what we're seeing. Then, after another 20 to 30 seconds, the 2 smaller orbs each broke / exploded into 5, 6, 7 smaller orbs, then zigzagged as in the same direction as they got smaller and then disappeared, which left the large orb. After another 5 to 10 seconds, the large orb got smaller, then gone.
And that brings us to an end to UFOs of Christmas Past, Chapter 3. Merry Christmas. I repeat, get offended now. Merry Christmas. Bunch of sissies, always getting offended by every little thing. We'll be back here next week. Thanks for listening, and God bless.
I was sitting on the balcony of my apartment of the There's no noise for there's no noise or any other phenomena. There was no noise or any other